This is a story I wrote back in 2022 based on an old Zen story. I call it An Extinguished Candle Lights the Way. In a small house on the side of a mountain lived a spiritual master. He lived a quiet, simple life, yet there was an undeniable quality about him and his way of living that was attractive to people everywhere. One day, a traveler came to visit with the hopes of learning his secret. Many years ago, the traveler set himself on a journey to find the great secret, talked about and lived by all the great spiritual teachers. He traveled the world, studying religions, hoping the next book, the next way, the next encounter would finally unlock the secret that would give him the spiritual understanding and peace he yearned for. Countless times, he enthusiastically approached a new path, a new idea, a new book, a new encounter, only to be disappointed again and again. There was something standing in his way, something he did not understand. He felt he was traveling in circles. He hoped, as many times before, this new encounter might be different, but was quietly prepared to be disappointed again. For some time, he heard people in the region mention the master's name, but there was nothing in their conversation about him that seemed unusual or special. Nothing that made him different from anyone else. One day, while listening to a conversation, a traveler probed one who knew the master and asked, "This master you speak about, is there any way I can recognize him? Is there something that makes him unusual or different?" "No, there is nothing," came the answer. "He is no different than anybody else. But when he is nearby, things do seem different. People are drawn to him and seem happier when he is around. Other than that, no difference." He paused a moment and smiled and said, Wait. There is something that's different. He really likes watermelon." The traveler stood dumbstruck. This is certainly not what he was expecting to hear. That was the only difference? How is it possible for a spiritual master, a true spiritual master, to be no different from anyone else? The traveler's curiosity grew. He decided to make the trip up the mountain and see for himself. The next day, the traveler arrived at the master's small dwelling. He was warmly greeted and welcomed inside. The man greeting the traveler was of average height and build, soft-spoken, and simply dressed. He looked no different from the hundreds of people in the village below. The room was small and sparse, but comfortable. The traveler said he had come to learn the secret of an enlightened mind, and began by telling the master how he had spent his whole life in search of truth and enlightenment, how he had studied holy books and earnestly tried to follow the ways of the great religious teachers. He described how each religion appeared to be a product of its own particular culture, with its own unique set of principles and practices, and how some even considered their way to be superior to all others. What I seek, said the traveler, is the experience that transcends all the principles and practices that seems to be holding me in place. I feel all my study and practice has left me more confused and farther rather than closer to what I seek. I now believe the highest way of living has nothing to do with principles and practices. While they may provide the illusion of enlightenment and freedom, they do not seem to provide the reality. The master listened carefully, and after a while he said, "You cannot achieve it by trying. You cannot achieve it by not trying. Why seek what you already have?" The traveler was puzzled by this response. For years, he had been taught that he was imperfect, that he lacked a special peace or quality that would make him complete, a peace he thought he could find outside himself in books, in teachers, and religious practices. Finding that peace, then, was the motivating force of his life. He was puzzled by the master's statement, "Why seek what you already have?" The traveler and the master sat and talked all day and into the night. From time to time they walked outside and talked while gazing at the valley below. The traveler asked the deepest questions gathered from years of religious practice and study, and the master answered with earnest examples from his own life. While his conversations with the master were interesting, with each passing hour the traveler could see this much anticipated encounter would be no different from all the rest. Sadly, he prepared himself in advance for just that outcome. When the traveler realized the late hour, he begged the master for his kindness and begged his leave and walked to the door, disappointed again. As the traveler opened the door and stepped outside, he paused and saw the night sky was black, and there was no moon to guide his way down the mountain path. He turned to the master and said, "It is dark. I cannot see. How can I find my way home?" From across the room, the master found a little candle, lit it, and brought it to the traveler. But the moment the traveler touched the candle, the master blew it out. A look of astonishment came to the traveler's face. He looked at the master, who was gazing at him with a gentle but knowing smile. It was then, in that moment, the traveler understood. He found the answer he had been searching for all these years. His eyes were opened to the truth. He saw the path forward, and his life was forever changed. What a strange little story. Why would the master not provide aid to the traveler? Why, after hours of questions and answers, was the student left unfulfilled? And why, with no words and the blowing out of a single candle, why did that make everything clear to the traveler? Well, it's here I should probably stop my story and allow you to arrive at your own conclusions about its meaning. You may find it all nonsense and not worth another thought, or you may find, as the traveler did, something important for your life in that story. Either way, it's fine. If you have found something of value in this story, you can stop watching now and don't listen any further and simply consider your understanding in all of its depth, and hopefully it will help you in some way. If it is of any value, here is one way the story might be understood. To gain some insight into this and perhaps other spiritual stories, we need to consider the difference between the mind of the master and the mind of the traveler. In truth, they are completely different beings who think, who speak, and act in completely different ways. They may move in the same way. They may speak using the same words, but there is nothing common between them. That's why the traveler can sit all day with the master and be no closer to the truth than when he began. Strange as it may seem, the traveler did not understand a single word the master said, and vice versa. Could this be the difference? The traveler thinks, speaks, and acts only in the physical world, the world of the senses. Every phrase he utters, every gesture he makes is in the world of the physical. Conversely, it could be that the master always thinks in terms of the spiritual. He always thinks and speaks and acts in a world beyond the senses, in the words of the spiritual. The words they speak may be the same, but they don't communicate. How can this be? Khalil Gibran, the great Lebanese writer, artist, and philosopher, described these two different minds this way. He said, "We measure time according to the movement of countless suns and stars. They measure time with little machines in their pockets. Now tell me, how could we ever meet at the same place and the same time?" In this story, the traveler said, "It is dark. I cannot see." From the traveler's point of view, this was an expression of physical reality. He looked and saw the dark and wondered how he was going to be able to find his way down the mountain path through the darkness. But the master, who has transcended the physical, interprets the traveler's remarks in a completely different way. The word dark to the master may have nothing to do with the physical circumstances of the late hour. To the master, dark means confused, unable to see clearly with the mind. And the word home to the traveler describes a physical dwelling with doors and windows and walls. To the master, home is the spiritual center, the enlightened mind. The master interpreted the traveler's remarks as a plea for spiritual help, not physical help. He could not have interpreted it any other way. He lit a candle and brought it to the traveler. The traveler thought he was receiving physical help, but the master had no such intent. Handing him the candle, the master blew it out. The traveler was astonished, and then, gazing at the extinguished candle, saw the light, the spiritual light of awakening and understanding. the light that would show the traveler his true path forward. Without words, the Master helped the traveler learn the great secret. You cannot find the way to your home using the light from another's candle. You must use your own light. Here's a little postscript to the story. There once was a young boy who lived with his father and mother in a house on the great plains of the West. They'd finished their evening meal and were sitting by the fire. It grew late, and as the boy was getting ready for bed, he remembered he'd left a prized possession of his a little distance from the house, and asked his mother if he could go out and get it. He walked to the back door and opened it and looked out into the darkness. But he could only go as far as the first step outside the door. He felt the chill of the evening air, but could see nothing. It was dark, and he was afraid. He wanted to take a step, but could not. So he went back to his mother, who was waiting just inside. "Mother," he said, "I'm afraid. It's so dark, and I cannot see my way." His mother handed him a little flashlight and said, "Here, take this. It will help you." This time he opened the door and stepped outside into the dark, holding the little flashlight in front of him. But the light did not overcome the darkness or his fear. Even as he held it in his outstretched arm, its weak beam melted into the dark, just a few feet ahead of where he was standing. He was just about to turn and go back inside, and his mother came and stood beside him. He looked at her and said, "Mother, I cannot see all the way I have to go with this little light. I am still afraid." She knelt down, put her arm around him, and said something that stayed with him through all his life. She said, "You might not be able to see all the way to where you want to go with your little light, but just have courage to take small steps into the light you have. And each time you step, more of your path will show itself to you. Just step into your little light, and you will be on your way." I hope you've enjoyed these stories.